morning, everyone. So I am indeed, my name is Delvare, working for Suse for the last 19 years now. At the level 3 support, but also maintaining a number of open source software, and in particular maintaining Dmidecode. And today I'm going to explain to hardware manufacturers how they can help me and make Dmidecode an even better tool. A short introduction of what is Dmidecode, if you not know about that tool. It's a user space implementation of the SMBIOS specification. That specification is published by the DMTF, so Desktop Management Task Force, updated on a yearly basis, and it describes a DMI table, which is binary data provided by firmware. And that table contains records, each describing a system component, either firmware or hardware component. The tool was written by Alan Cox in 2000, long ago. It was essentially a proof of concept at the time, and I rewrote most of it afterwards, and I'm maintaining the tool since 2002. There's also a Dmidecode table decoder in the Linux kernel, but it's meant for kernel drivers, while Dmidecode is meant for user space usage. Despite the name, there's a D in Desktop Management Task Force and Desktop Management Interface. It is absolutely not limited to desktop machines, and as a matter of fact, I think it's a lot more useful on server systems than other systems. It's a very simple tool with plain text output at the moment, but we are working on JSON output coming pretty soon, hopefully. I know it's been requested for like 10 years, and finally we are getting there. Here's an example of a DMI record. That's a very basic example of port connector information, which lets you match the internal reference designator of a port with the external designator and the type of the connector. So this really relates to something really real on your hardware. There are many other types which exist, describing firmware, enclosure, CPU, cache memory modules, internal slots, etc., etc. They're really covering everything that is in your system, in your hardware system. And more standard types and enumerated values are being added by the DMTF over time, because the hardware evolves, so the specification has to evolve as well. And, well, this is another kind of DMI record, another example, and you probably don't find it so funny anymore. It's only binary data, you have no idea what it means, what it represents, and you can do anything with that. The reason is that this is not a standard DMI type, this is an OEM specific type. So it really depends on the hardware manufacturer, what's in it. This kind of records typically contain information added by the hardware manufacturer for their own use. Maybe they need it for their hardware, for the kernel drivers driving hardware, or maybe they need it for system management or inventory purposes. And, well, we simply can't decode that if we don't get the help of hardware manufacturers to explain to us how the binary data is encoded and how to decode it. And decoded OEM-specific record would look like that, which I think you will find a lot more interesting. This specific record is related to network, and it matches PCI device ID with a MAC address. And you may argue that both information are already available from other tools on the system, but in general, you have one tool which mentions the PCI device ID, and you have another tool which gives you the MAC address, and you don't have a single tool which matches both. So having this information in the DMI table is very useful. And this is the reason why this vendor decided to put it there. And thanks to the contribution, we were able to actually decode that, and now everybody can benefit from the information. And this typically provides information which is beyond what the standard DMTF types can encode, which is the reason why the vendor decided to add it. This kind of information can be very valuable for scalar companies and basically every company which manages hardware, and especially they own a large number of systems. And even more so if they own systems from different hardware manufacturers. They can use the information for hardware validation. When they receive the hardware, they can check that it really corresponds to what they asked for. Not only the hardware pieces, but how the hardware is configured, how everything links together. This can also be very useful if you need to replace a component which is defective and you have to spot where that component is. And this information can be really useful to locate quickly the piece of hardware which is to be replaced. So why, as a hardware manufacturer, would you want to contribute to Dmidecode? Well, this is really simple, because this will let your customers make the best use of the system they bought from you. The information is in the DMI table because your teams need it for their own tools. And if your own management tools need it, then open source management tools need exactly the same for the same reasons. So it's clearly better to let your customers choose which management tool they want to use, because they know better what's good for them. And in the long run, it could actually become a decision factor when you have to choose between two hardware manufacturers and everything else is equal, same quality, same kind of machines. Well, it can become a decision factor if integration with open source tools is better from one vendor. For example, Dmidecode being one example of how you can integrate better with open source tools. Now is my time to give some praise and thanks to one company which has been playing the game for a long time now. This is Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. They have been contributing to Dmidecode for a long time now. The first contribution came in January 2007 from John Kegel. And at the time being, this is Jerry Homan, which is contributing since September 2017. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here today, but I still want to thank him a lot for his great work and great contribution to my tool. That's really a significant number of commits from him. Meanwhile, and thanks to his contribution, we are now supporting 20 HP-specific DMI record types, which range from networking, storage, devices, firmware information, and so on. The list is pretty long. And the aim clearly is to cover all the OEM-specific types from HP server to reach 100% coverage within a few years. A very concrete example of HP's contribution to a product. Let me show you a non-decoded DME type from HP server. And well, you don't understand what it's all about. You see a lot of binary data, you see a few strings, but you don't really know what these strings correspond to, so clearly you will not be able to do a lot with this. And then comes Jerry Homan, and he commits the changes to Dmidecode, and now this is what Dmidecode displays instead. Not only you know what this type is about, but it also gives you very valuable information. For example, this one is about storage. It describes a hard drive type. It gives you the type of the drive, the ID, capacity, power and time, wattage, so very low-level technical information, form factor, and so on. But more importantly, from a hardware owner perspective, it gives you the serial number of the drive, and it gives you the location of the drive, so where the drive is actually physically located. So in the event where you have a drive failure, and you need to replace your drive, and you want to do that as quickly as possible to minimize the downtime. This is exactly the kind of information you want, because then you don't have to look for all the drives and try to read the small labels with the serial numbers on them. You can simply go straight to the right place, to the right location, and change the drive without looking, because you know that is the one drive you want to change. And that would not be possible without the contribution of HP to the Dmidecode tool. And lastly, okay, now you want, hopefully I convinced you that you want to contribute to Dmidecode, so how you would be doing that? Well, it's very simple. The Dmidecode project is hosted on Savannah, so it's in the open. You can post patches directly there through the web interface if you don't want to go deeper into the code and the community. We also have a Git tree, so if you prefer, you can clone it and send pull request, and we'll process that. We also have a mailing list where you can post patches for review if you are uncertain of what you need to do. You can even just provide documentation, just not under NDA, because I wouldn't be able to do anything with that. But any documentation without NDA, I will be really pleased to read and write the code myself to add support if you don't have any engineer able to do that. Whatever works for you, really, and I will do the rest so that your effort pays and your systems are better supported by Dmidecode. And really, it's a pretty trivial task. This is C code, very simple thing. So I think you can really contribute the code yourself if you prefer not to disclose your documentation. HPE is actually doing both. They are providing the code and the documentation, which is really appreciated. So thank you, HPE, once again. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for your attention. If you have questions now or later, they will welcome.
Hi, I'm hearing that HP is a proper supporter and contributor of the project.
Yes.
What is the level of engagement with other brands like Giga or Mytech?
Sorry.
What is the engagement coming from other companies like ODMs into the project? Are they contributing actively?
Right now, really, we have only HP contributing actively to Dmidecode. All of our vendors, I don't have any feedback from them or any contribution.
Mytech is here. We will do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
And just for sharing, the story we are speaking about the Dmidecode, it saved us a very dramatic event on our infrastructures. And the only way to save it was just before Black Friday, which is for us and a tech company is the worst event, so the best event of the year, but the worst time, the worst time to make the event. And the DMI structures saved us and were giving us the options to find out what was the servers in trouble and to fix them just before Black Friday. Without Dmidecode, we would not have been able to make it. So it's not only kind of, oh, it's fun, we can get some information. No, it saves productions. And there is a real life case that we were having at Criteo. So it's one of the reasons why I've been inviting Jean, is just to show that it's not for, we are not asking our vendors to do it for fun. It is really, truly important.
Hi, so two-part question. How many NDAs have you been asked to sign? And why do companies think that you should sign an NDA to see a data sheet?
For this specific project, I never had to sign an NDA. I would not anyway. I had to sign one for another project long ago, but I would not sign it anymore.
So I get asked on like maybe a monthly basis to sign NDAs, and it's always about some secret proprietary flashing protocol that's the same as all of the others. And I don't understand why vendors would make you sign an NDA to decode a blob of data.
I don't think it makes any sense anywhere, because basically the documentation translates directly to code, and what the code is in the wild under GPL. then basically all the information from the NDA document is already public. So NDAs don't make any sense in the open source world anyway.
Even more strangely, we had one vendor saying that they cannot contribute this time to Dmidecode because the content is precious. And what if it's already exposed, not to decode it? I mean, it's there, we can read it. So if it's not so secret, put it secret. But if you show it, decode it. So there is still sometimes some types which are in the between. We don't really understand why. So we are putting pressure to other vendors to make it available, but it's still sometimes a bit difficult.
Thanks again for Dmidecode because it's really important for a lot of elements. And so I have one request for the OEM vendors. Please fill the fields correctly, because when you do serial number and you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's not very useful, because this tool is really useful for when you receive the machine, you need to match it in the DCIM, in your inventory, to know to what space, what kind you need it. So the serial number is the first thing to match the hardware ecosystem with the software one. And also on the other side, when you have issues on the software, because latencies or whatever, this is the Dmidecode is also the first tool that is used to identify which part, like you said. For example, also for the DIMMs, you have the locators on the DIMMs to specify exactly which space. Same for the PCI slot. Yep. You have the locator elements that you added, and it's really useful to do the link between the server, or at least operating system space, and the hardware one, because it's different teams, and we need this to have a kind of link between the two.
Yes, I would add about the OEM information not always reliable. This is actually one more reason to implement the OEM specific records, because these, in my experience, are of much higher quality than the generic types, which often contains garbage which we can't make anything about.
Hi, Hall. Have you tried some lobbying by the government, or even on the European scale, to push for such tools? That may be included in some kind of legislation on the European scale. Has it been done? Lobbying?
No, it's not been done. I'm really hoping that we can just convince hardware vendors that this is in their own interest to provide the information without having to be forced by legislations or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. It could be promoted.
Could be.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.